All right. Well, I'd like to call to order the Salem-Keizer Area Transportation Study. It is Tuesday, November 26th. Happy almost Thanksgiving, 2024. And let's go around the room with introductions. I'm gonna start with Julie because she has a special introduction to make.
So first, Julie Hanson, Transportation Planning Manager for the City of Salem. And I brought with me
Hayden Dettinger, I'm the new transportation planner.
So he's a new to the city, really new, working in the profession, you know, from his undergraduate degree. And so I'm excited that he can help me and we can mold him into the perfect transportation planner.
Fantastic. Welcome
And
aboard.
hopefully he'll come back after sitting through this meeting.
Okay. Noted. We're gonna have to behave. All right. Desiree?
Oh, Desiree Collins, that stuff.
Kim Seppinar, SKATS staff.
Steve Dobernich, SKATS staff.
Lyle Moore, Polk County.
Kathy Clark, Mayor of Keizer.
Tammy Kunz, Keizer Community Diversity Engagement.
Jacqueline Payne, Greater Northeast Keizer Neighborhood Association.
All right, let's go online. Mike,
Mike Jaffe, Transportation Planning Director.
Brandon,
Brandon Williams, Regional Planner, sitting in for Anna Henson, Area Manager for ODOT.
Trevor,
Trevor Phillips, City of Salem Counselor.
Sadie,
Good afternoon, everybody. Sadie Carney with the Chariots Board.
Ray,
Ray Jackson, excuse me, SCAT staff.
Ashley,
Ashley Briers, Federal Highway in Salem.
and hey, Kyle.
Hello, Kyle Duran, Keizer City Council.
And Kim, we already got you, Steve, and Shofi.
Hey, good to see you all. This is Shofi with Chariots. I'm the Chief Planning and Development Officer.
All right, do we miss anybody? All right, the first order of business is approval of the policy committee minutes from October 22nd. Were there any additions or corrections to note? Sadie.
Thank you, Chair Clark. I would just say first, I wasn't able to attend that meeting, so thank you for the great minutes. And having not been there, not a lot of clarification to offer, but I will say that Sarah Duncan's name is misspelled on the first page. It should have an N
I should have an N for Duncan.
at the end of her last name. Sorry, I could have provided more clarity. My apologies.
I'd go look at an H kid on there or, okay. All right, anything else? Motion to approve as corrected.
Moved to accept. Second.
Moved by Lyle, seconded by Trevor to accept, to approve the minutes as corrected. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed signify by saying no. No objection, motion passes unanimously. Public comment this time is provided for members of the public to address the policy committee. Unless it's a public hearing, I don't think we have any today. So open to public comment. I think it's pretty much. Okay, all right, let's go on then to our SKATS discretionary funding evaluation criteria. Pete.
Okay, gonna share my screen. There's information in the packet as well, attachment D. And PowerPoint. Going. Okay, so the purpose of this agenda item is to talk about our evaluation criteria for the upcoming TIP. Gonna review and provide feedback on the draft criteria and walk through the process that we go through for project selection. Not asking for any decisions today, but just feedback, and we'll come back in January with a request to finalize the criteria.
I'm gonna press pause for a second. I want to acknowledge for the record that Maria Hinojosa is on now, and she's school district. Hi, Maria.
Hey, all. Sorry for being late. My computer was not wanting to work.
Totally understand how that happens. All right,
The slide larger, Desiree. Thanks. Or just close the chat there. Perfect, thanks. Okay, so a little bit of background. I think as everyone knows, we, SKATS invited eligible project sponsors to apply for funding in the upcoming TIP cycle. We actually, the pre-application deadline was just last week. I think we got around 20 or 21 pre-applications to start the conversation about projects. And then in February, we'll have, the end of February is the full application deadline. So as part of that, we have our TAC members evaluate the project proposals using some evaluation criteria. And we'll ask this body to adopt, look at and adopt the evaluation criteria again this year. So last time they were updated was in January 2022. And some of the changes at that time were to better link with federal performance targets and improve the alignment with our long-range MTP project evaluation process. And then I'll just point out that the criteria is really there to help us meet federal requirements. And then the goal is to make sure they also reflect our regional priorities as we go through and select projects. So for today, I'm going to recap the pre-application review process. We don't have any proposed changes for that process. I'll just kind of touch on that really briefly. And then also we'll go into more depth on the application review process. There's two parts to the application review process. There's a technical score and a qualitative score. We also have a survey out right now that is focused mainly on the criteria that's part of the technical score. So that information, as well as feedback here, will get rolled into the updates that we make and bring back in January.
so I can't see if hands get raised, so Desiree, if you could flag me if that happens, if somebody can see that part of the screen. Or if you're online, and you have a question, just sing out, because I can't see you.
So as far as the pre-application review process, this is essentially a way for us to just see what types of applications are coming, sort of take a first pass at evaluating them before the project sponsors have gone through the work of filling out a full application. We're going to go through this at the next TAC meeting to look at the project pre-apps and rank them. So essentially the way it works is we have members of the TAC rank the pre-applications as either high, medium, or low priority. The scores are added together, and then based on that, we rank them and give feedback on, there's some discussion about project scope and what seems like it's gonna float to the top, what seems like it might not, or might need some work. Basically just to provide some feedback on the projects before the jurisdictions go through the full application process. So as far as the review of the full applications goes, this happens after obviously the applications are completed in February, so we'll get started with this process in March. And like I said, there's two parts. There's a technical score and there's a qualitative score. And once those are scored, we come up with an initial project ranking. And based on the ranking, as well as other factors, we the TAC makes a recommendation to the policy committee on which projects to fund. So I'm going to dive a little more deeply into the technical score first. So this is a 10-part criteria, and it measures the project's benefits using what's essentially based on our MTP goals. So there's 10 MTP goals and there's 10 criteria that are part of this technical score. committee of TAC members assign scores to each of the criteria. They do this as a group consensus score, so they essentially agree on where each project ranks. You know, is it does it strongly support this piece of criteria? Does it just support? Is it kind of status quo, or is it a detriment or hindrance? So they get a 2, a 1, a 0, or a -1 based on that. After the scoring is done, we do there's a weighting factor that gets applied, and then scores are added together for a final technical score. The criteria themselves are, next slide. So they are addresses safety or security, addresses a traffic bottleneck along a corridor, improves transit operations or access to transit, reduces a gap in a regional system. So this would be like bike lanes, sidewalks, traffic control systems. Number 5 is extends the life of a transportation system assets through preservation or maintenance. Then we have the second half are improves the movement of freight, increased access to employment centers and jobs, reduces greenhouse gas or carbon monoxide emissions, benefits low income and or minority populations or neighborhoods. And then the 10th is improves hazard resilience related to seismically vulnerable bridges, flood risk, or the ODOT lifeline routes. So that's the kind of the base criteria. I think what I'll do now is in the packet, there's an Appendix A, which has the technical scoring matrix. So it's essentially how we decide what scores they get for each of those criteria. So I'm going to show that on the screen as well. Hopefully this looks all right. Okay, zoom out a little bit. And this is the same, it's just flipped, it's transposed from what's in the packet, but you're looking at the exact same information. I'll try to zoom in a tiny bit. So going down the side, we have the 10 pieces of criteria, and then a description for what gets a strongly support, what's a support, what's a no impact, or what's a hindrance for each of them. So as far as safety and security, this focuses on safety issues. So a strongly supports, or a 2, which is the maximum score here, would be addresses a safety issue located on the high injury network, or improves safety of vulnerable users. You remember the high injury network is something that came out of the safety plan that SKATS was working on. A 1 would be addresses a safety issue, but it's not located on the high injury network. A 0 would be has no impact, and then a negative for anything that reduces safety, like making crossing distances farther, contributing to higher speed travel for automobiles. So that would be a negative in those cases. For bottlenecks, traffic bottlenecks along the corridor, a 2 would be a project includes 1 or more strategies from the congestion management process to address bottleneck. Well, looks like Sadie has her hand up.
Sadie?
Yeah, just a quick question. I had this as I was reading the packet too. Does our CMP, and I probably should know this at this point, have an official like definition for what qualifies as a bottleneck? Or is that more subjective?
Right.
So we don't have a definition so much as we use what is produced by the software program that we're using. So Redis says there is a bottleneck, and it's based on an amount of time over a day that there is slowage, traffic's not going the speed limit. But we don't have our own definition in the CMP.
Okay.
I thought it was a Coors Light in a bottle.
Like your definition, Commissioner.
Okay, and for the record, Commissioner
Yeah,
Cameron has joined the meeting.
Let the record reflect.
Let the record reflect. All right. So we do have everybody here. Is there a US DOT definition?
Not that that I'm aware of, but I will look at and, get back to you guys in January
Okay,
or send an email before then.
that would be helpful. Good question, thanks.
Okay, so the third criteria is improved transit operations or access. A score of 2, so a strongly support would be it improves operations or increases access on a core network transit route. A 1 would be it does it on a non-core network transit route. A 0 would be it does not impact the transit system. And a negative would be any project that would likely decrease transit service operations or reduce access. The fourth criteria is reduces a gap in a regional system. So we would give it 2 for eliminating a gap in the system. So connecting a gap in sidewalks, for example. So you can actually travel along the network continually without being disrupted. A 1 would be reducing the gap, but you're not actually closing the gap completely. So that's a slightly lower score. And then a 0 would be it doesn't address a gap in the regional system. The fifth is extends the life of the system through preservation or maintenance. So a 2 would be extending the life of bridge, pavement, extending useful life of bus or transit facility, replacing a bus at the end of its life, or upgrading a signal. And then couldn't really think of examples that would be detrimental or would likely get a negative score here, but you get a 0 if there's just no impact on system assets. The 6th criteria is improves the movement of freight. So if it does it along a critical urban freight corridor, you get a 2. If it does improve movement of freight, but it's not on a critical urban freight corridor, you get a 1. No impact would be 0. And if it adds impediments, then it would get a -1. The 7th criteria is access to employment centers and jobs. So you can get a 2 for improving access to employment centers and jobs, a 0 for no impact, and then if it creates a barrier, there would be a negative score. For reducing greenhouse gas emissions, likely to reduce would be a 2, limited impact would be a 0, and then if it's likely to increase emissions, then it would get a negative score. The benefits low income or minority populations is a 2 if it improves transportation assets or facilities in an environmental justice area or improves operations which directly benefits environmental justice populations. It would be a 0 if it does not impact EJ populations, and a negative if it has a negative impact. And the last criteria is improves hazard resilience. And so if it upgrades a seismically vulnerable bridge or improves resiliency on an ODOT lifeline, we give it a 2, and then a 0 for no impact. So that's the matrix in a nutshell. I realize not every box is filled in. I think for any of these, we could score them -1 through 2. But this is essentially just our guide for how we would do that.
Okay.
I can linger here, or I can keep going and talk about the qualitative score, whatever.
I'm not seeing any hands pop up. We good?
Okay.
All right, keep going.
Okay. So the qualitative score, this is the second part to the scoring, and it's basically used to evaluate the proposals based on factors that aren't included in the technical scores. So broadly, some of those examples would be things like the accuracy of the cost estimate, the appropriateness of the solution, whether or not the project's important on a regional level, whether it's important to the jurisdiction and how they rank it compared to other projects they're applying for, and then the readiness of the project to go and obligate on time and work through the process. For the qualitative score, TAC members score the applications based on the criteria, and then the scores are added together and averaged into a group score. So instead of like the group consensus we use for the technical score, everyone scores these separately, and then we average those. Okay, so currently, and in the past TIP cycle, the qualitative score had 3 parts to it. And those were scope and cost estimate, importance and support, and readiness and capacity. And they all have their own separate matrix of qualifications of how they score and add up to 20 total. But when we talked about this topic with the TAC earlier this month, they had feedback about that, and because of that, we have a second proposal or a second option, which combines this into a single combined piece of criteria, which kind of puts everything together as one qualitative score. And hope the next few slides show that in a little more depth. So in the current version, the scope and cost estimate is part 1, and this is a 10-point part of the qualitative score. And so you get a 10 for things like appropriate scope, complete project, realistic schedule and cost estimate, and then fewer points if you meet only partially or mostly or partially, or it doesn't really meet the specifics here. Importance of scope gets 7 points in the current system, and this is focused on the priority of the project, whether it's regionally significant, if it has public support, and then the urgency to solve the problem. And the last part is readiness and capacity, and this focuses on the whether there's an adequate level of planning, if it's ready to proceed, and if there's an ability to deliver it on time and within budget. So that's the version that was used previously, and so I titled that option 1 altogether. I'm going to switch to option 2. This is still drafty, so room for editing, but basically just combine all those into one matrix, because what we found in our TAC discussion was that there was some overlap between those 3 parts and some confusion about what would score where and those relative importance to one another. So we thought that potentially grouping them up together and refining this a little bit might be a solution for the qualitative score. So it's really similar information. It's things like whether it's an appropriate scope and solution, if the schedule's realistic, if the cost estimate is solid, if it's a priority for the jurisdiction and the region, urgency of the project, and then the level of planning. So that would be ideally an 18 or a full score. Then you would get something between a 12 and a 17 if you meet most of the conditions. For meeting some of them, it would be between a 6 and 11, and then lower for if you meet fewer of them. So that's my slides. And actually that went a lot faster than I expected, so that's cool. But basically today we just want to get feedback on these. We will, like I said, we'll have survey results in a couple weeks or maybe a week that we'll talk about with the TAC. And we're going to ask them to recommend a set of evaluation criteria in January and bring them back to you. But we have time now to talk about aspects of this, or I can go back to any part that folks want to focus on.
Trevor?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, staff. So this seems familiar, and I think we voted on some like nominal changes or upgrades to it not too long ago, like when it comes to, you know, EJ, the environmental justice, and maybe pedestrian safety. And in this comment is the question, was it this criteria that we voted on, or was it something else? Like this policy body added, you know, some additional criteria to the rubric of decision-making and scoring.
Yeah, so last time this evaluation criteria was updated was in January 2022. So that would have been in the lead up to the development of the current tip.
Okay. Because I think I'm seeing what we voted on in this, so it makes sense. Like, it's like, oh, good, that's there, that's there.
Been a fast 2 years.
Yeah.
And just to jump in, yeah, this is also, we have criteria for the tip, and we also have criteria for when we're doing the MTP, and they're very similar.
Yeah.
So you might be remembering both of them or one of them separately, but we try to keep them consistent. So, you know, that it might not be, well, the long range plan doesn't have 2, 1, 0, -1, but we do have the same goals and we try to go with the same criteria. So if there's also that possibility of you've seen that as well. So that's why you might be thinking you've seen this multiple times. It's you have, just slightly different.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And it feels like we are consistent in a lot of what we're looking at with criteria and developing our projects. So I had the same feeling of deja vu, and yeah, we have seen it before, in my opinion. Sadie.
Thank you, Chair Clark. I'm sorry, I had to take a call from our daycare because they think my daughter has chicken pox in time for Thanksgiving, and my husband had to go get her. So I missed just are we deciding anything, or what is the purpose of representing the two different options?
I think you can steer us towards a direction. I think the main question there was, we feel like option 2 is based on the TAC discussion, kind of the evolution that we want to go towards for the qualitative score. But wanted to, since we had this opportunity for this meeting, run that by this group and make sure that's on track.
Okay, thank you. I would just, I had a long email back and forth earlier this morning with somebody who's trying to cook up some legislation around clear and objective standards for the state of Washington. And I just worry about some of the language in here and our ability to use it in terms of evaluation, because words like appropriate, reasonable, most, some, are, you know, it's very much in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
That's a lot of this also has to do with the eye of the applicant. So in the case of, let's say, the city of Keizer, what we have from our transportation system plan meets those criteria, whether another jurisdiction agrees with us or not. That's Keizer's appropriate, reasonable, and necessary point of view. And then we have that conversation here between the jurisdictions. Would be the way I would think about it.
Yeah,
I would have done Wheatland.
I think we can, maybe at a staff level, we can think about tightening up some of the language of things like appropriate and reasonable, and try to take a more neutral tone. I think we've attempted to do that, but I think, again, this is a draft version, and I would say an early draft version of this. So it's not perfect, but I think, anyway, I can think about ways that, and with the other staff planners, just what kind of edits or tweaks we might make to it.
I actually like the wording. It gives us the flexibility to create or to rate the jobs like Kathy said, for us to dictate what is reasonable and very important on their level, or we don't live there, don't experience on a daily basis. I think that's where we need to get the information from these projects. City of Salem has their own prerogative on what they do in projects and where they put their focus for the betterment of our community, and they have their reasonings. And I like this possible and does it, and it just leaves those questions open so we can dictate where that importance lies. But it still follows that 10 criteria that we put together. I mean, that it's still based on our thoughts and where we put the priorities. So those 10 criteria is very important.
Looking at some of the language on, and it comes from the cost and scope. So maybe that's the space, because then that cycles down to option 2 with the appropriate, quote unquote. So appropriate scope being more related to the technical definition of what is being proposed being constructed, such as if you are planning to do a great streets upgrade, the appropriate scope would be, you know, in the range of that, what is necessary for that upgrade, rather than say, you know, we're going to also add the kitchen sink and everybody else's kitchen sink. So I think when we're talking about scope, maybe that definition could be more around that it achieves the stated objective of this project. It doesn't have seemingly additional or superfluous elements, or at least we could have that conversation around those. You know, if jurisdiction X puts in something, then we could have that conversation. You added this element, can you help us understand it in the scope? So we could have that conversation so we could understand the appropriateness. Does that feel a little bit closer? Kevin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just looking at this. We just did this in 22, right? All these criteria that we're reviewing.
Yes.
Okay. Was there anything that was done, you know, that happened during the evaluation process that somebody thought, well, this didn't work, or it was different?
We didn't.
Or are we just, I mean, one of our options today is say, just keep the same criteria, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
We didn't add any new projects last time, so it's tough to know.
Yeah, so, and that was the other question. Maybe I was too embarrassed to ask it. How much money are we talking about that this criteria would actually evaluate?
Yeah, so we estimated it would be about $28 million that would be funded for projects with SKATS discretionary funds using this criteria.
For the year 27 through 32?
Yes.
Yeah. So over a 5-year period.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that one of our options is just keep the same criteria, not make a bunch of changes or any changes. Thanks.
Okay. So if you get a epiphany in the middle of the night, make sure you write it down, because we're going to be revisiting these in January, correct?
January, yeah.
Okay.
Mike has his hand up.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah, hello, everyone. I was just going to say that, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's correct. The last cycle, yeah, we didn't add any new projects, but we had a lot of applications, so we had the same application process. And I think we got as far as scoring the projects, but then when it came to project selection, that's when we took the off-ramp and actually didn't fund any of the new projects. So we did go through this process of scoring last time, and the TAC members in their discussion earlier this month were reflecting, on that process and seeing if they thought there was a better way to go about it. So that's why option 2 is presented here. And they haven't seen option 2. They discussed it in concept, but they haven't seen it laid out like you're seeing it today. So they're gonna talk about it in December, and we'll see if they like it, if they have some changes to it. And I'll throw it back to Steve in case he has anything to add to that.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, that I think covers it for the most part, and like we said, we'll have some feedback from our survey in a week or a week and a half, and some more opportunity to talk to the TAC about this, and then the goal is to bring this back in January for this group to look at and okay the criteria, and we're hoping that I don't think we're making any changes that are too radical or too large, but making some changes on the ends with it.
Yeah, and we may ask you as a group to look at the weighting of those criteria, whether to keep it as you see it in the technical scores, the weighting that you see, or if you wanted to make any changes to that.
I could touch on that really briefly now, the weighting factor. So the way that's worked in the previous cycle was on the technical score, we have the 10 criteria, and they're all scored between a -1 and a 2. The last cycle, the addresses safety, so the safety criteria had a weighting factor of 2, and then all the other criteria were a single or a weighting factor of 1. So that just meant if you got a 2 on the safety criteria, it actually was a 4. So puts a little bit more emphasis on safety, and in that piece of criteria, that's something we want to get feedback on. I think that it's our understanding that we want to continue to focus on safety and have that be one of the weighted higher than other criteria, but how we do that and whether there's other criteria that receive further weighting would be open for discussion as well.
Trevor?
Yeah, I just want to give more explicit feedback. Yeah, I like this. I like the technical scoring. So I feel like you guys did a good job, and I like this. I'm not opposed to something even better, but this looks like a great start.
And I would just add that we put out a public survey that we've shared, and as of this morning, we had 146 people who've responded to it. It's just it's a assessment of looking at the criteria, of saying what we did in the past, and some general impression or feedback, and then an open comment. So we're planning to keep that open till next Monday or Tuesday. Then we'll have that summary of information that will go to the TAC. It will come, and of course, come to the policy committee. I like to usually take it, there's a full report, and I kind of like to summarize the content of open discussion so that you can see it in general, but everything will be available for the policy committee to see in January.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Thank you all very much. Good information and feedback. Let's go on then to item E, which is the SKATS fiscal year 25-26. UPWP, talk about feeling like we just did this. Wow, that went fast.
Yes.
Oh, and
yes,
before we
Chair.
do that, Ray put up a definition for us on bottleneck. Let's get that up there. Localized section of highway where traffic experiences reduced speeds and delays due to recurring operational conditions or non-recurring traffic influencing events. And that is from FHWA.
Mine was a lot simpler.
I think
Yes,
Sadie
indeed.
has her hand raised.
Oh, hey, Sadie.
Yeah, I
You can add
do.
it.
Thank you for the definition, Ray. Is it only areas within our transportation system plan that are defined as highway?
It's the federal highway defines you mean highways versus arterials?
Arterials or just even network roads?
I would generalize it to any road.
Okay,
Federal highway just, I think they just using the word highway for their definition. That's only the first one I found. So by January, I might find 2 or 3 more from federal highway.
sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Okay, Mike.
All right, thank you, Chair. Yes, it does seem like we've talked about this recently because we adopted the UPWP first in May, and then we revised it in June with new numbers, so it hasn't been that long. But every year we have to come up with our work program. It's an annual work program, and it forms the basis of the intergovernmental agreement we have with ODOT about how will spend our funds for the coming year. So the current UPWP that was adopted and is in force covers July 2024 to June 2025. The one I'm talking to you about is the next one after that. So from July 2025 to June 2026. And we're following the same process of updating the UPWP that we did a year ago, which is we provide an outline of the items, the major items, and some bullets of some tasks within those items of what we want to do. And then we will get your feedback on any of this and incorporate your feedback. Then we'll produce the full document, which is usually a 40+ page document, in January for you to review. And that'll go out for its process of federal review and then come back to you later on for adoption, so we can start the year in July 2025 with this document. So going into the document that's in your packet, and I don't have any slides, so you have to follow along with the document that was in the packet. The outline that's in the packet starts off with a schedule. So the schedule starts here in November with this outline. In December, as I just mentioned, staff will write up the full document as a draft. Then in January, we'll have the TAC and you review that draft and give us any feedback. Then we submit it to ODOT and Federal Highway and Federal Transit for their review. They submit comments back to us. We have a meeting with them in February, and then we will revise the UPWP based on the federal and state comments, and then come back in April to the policy committee, show you what we've changed since the draft that you saw in January, and then ask you to approve the final document in April, and then we submit that to ODOT for processing so we can get our agreement, our funding agreement. So that's the schedule. The table you see on page 1 of the handout or the attachment shows some of the major documents or plans that will be updated in that UPWP. So the first 4, the public participation plan, the consultation process, our UPWP, and the SKATS TIP, which is probably the one people focus on the most, will all be products that we will complete in the next planning cycle. The other 4, the performance measures, the Title VI plan, congestion management process, and the long-range plan, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, those are all things that we'll work on in this next UPWP, but we won't adopt yet until the year after that. So you see all the dates there, but all 8 items are things we will be working on, if not adopting. Then the rest of the document goes in specifics about what the UPWP will include. I'm going to preface this a little bit. Every 4 years, we meet with our federal partners, and they review our planning process, and they produce a formal report. They're in the middle of, or toward the end of producing this report. We had an online meeting with them at the beginning of the month, and then yesterday we had a follow-up meeting, and those meetings were to discuss, first ask questions about our planning process, but then yesterday's meeting was to give a preview of what the final planning review document will say. And it's basically a document that says, SKATS, you need to either correct this part of a plan, or they recommend some improvement to a plan, or it might be just on the positive side, commendations for how we did our planning work. And yesterday they were saying commendations for our safety plan and the Safe Routes to School program. So some of those elements on the corrective actions or recommendations, when we get the final version, we'll incorporate those changes in our planning work program. So I say all that for the last minute because even though this outline is the guide we'll use to write the plan, there might be some adjustments based on this 4-year planning review that we should get in, I think is February is when the document is sent to us, the final version of it. So there's still be some tweaking based on those, that planning review. Anyway, with that aside mentioned, the rest of this handout with in this item is what we plan to do in a little more detail. And I'm just going to go over the major items, which I mentioned earlier is there's produced in the UPWP. There's this TIP update, which Steve just went over earlier, but this gives a little more content about what we'll be doing for that update. We have a congestion management process we want to update and have it completed by the fall of 2026. It has a little more detail about how we're going to do that. Our safety action plan, even though it's adopted, we want to continue that important work. So one of the action items was to have a yearly meeting to check in with our partners on projects. And there is a lot of safety work going on, especially with the city of Salem. And also just to continue seeing what the state of the art is for safety. So that's included in our work program. Our long range plan, which we update every 4 years, we will get started in that next planning cycle. And some of the changes will depend on, well, many of the changes will be updates, added projects that we didn't include in the current one, updated forecasts of revenue, any planning rules that might be finalized by the federal government that we need to comply with. And there were items in yesterday's meeting that they mentioned that we want to comply with. And then so we'll be working on that, but not actually adopting that in the next planning work program. I'm going over this fast because I don't want to waste too much of your time. But the other items would be the updating our PPP, our public participation plan. Get updates about any corridor area plans. In this case, it's just the 2251 project primarily. And then there's a lot of interagency coordination we do with the counties and cities and ODOT on anything from their TSP updates, travel modeling services, and the like. We'll do a whole bunch of modeling and data collection. We, as you've probably heard throughout the year, we did a household survey that was completed in the end of the spring. And now we're in the next step of compiling that data, but then using it for just general information, but more importantly, to update our travel model from the 4-step model to an activity-based model. And that work will be starting in 2025, continue for probably 2 years or so. Let's see, there is another section at the bottom of page 5 that discusses the work of the chariots as far as transit system planning that they have ongoing. They work on both their local service planning, but also a comprehensive operational analysis, which is the next step of their planning process. And then there are, so that's region-wide, but then there are some specific items listed on page 6, including continuing work on the South Salem Transit Center, service enhancement plans, the accessible paths to transit stops to see how well those connections are for people walking or biking to the transit stops, and then starting a planning process for the East Salem Transit Center. And then there's a couple other things on the last page having to do with transit districts need to do Title VI monitoring and their project to do the transit signal priority green light extension. So that's a lot of things to go over. Hopefully I didn't bore you too much with all the little details. And so that's the outline, as I said, and that's the schedule, and staff will be busy in December writing up the full plan. We're going to try to get it to you early in the month in January, so you have more than a week to review the draft document. And Chair, with that, I am finished.
All right, thank you. I don't think any of us here find this stuff boring because we're like, ooh, this is the good stuff. Any questions, comments, oh, by the ways, thus far? Okay, we will wait with bated breath for the longer version that we will be able to enjoy curled up with a hot cup of hot cocoa after the new year.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. Updates to the MTIP and the STIP amendment matrix. We're in the matrix.
Yeah, share another PowerPoint. Just this will be a shorter one. So I think in September, October, ODOT met with FHWA and FTA, and part of that conversation was they reviewed the STIP amendment matrix and came up with some edits that were essentially just for flexibility, clarity purposes to have this agreed upon document for how amendments are processed. Based on that, SKATS has made some minor edits to our MTIP amendment matrix so that we match that more closely. These are administrative edits, so I'm just sharing for informational purposes so that we match the ODOT and federal amendment matrix. So the first edits to the full amendment section was, and this is, if you're following along your packet, attachment 3 at the end of this section has the red line marking of the edits in the SKATS version. The slides will just give highlights of what's in there. But at the top in section 1.A.1, we rephrased the description of a full amendment type A in response to some feedback during our certification review. It was to just have some clarifying language around air quality conformity and how that factors into the full amendment type A versus our full amendment type B. And the difference being that for the type A amendments, we do a 30-day comment period, and it's required to go through an air quality conformity determination. But the type B is a shorter window. The next edit was in section 1B2, and we added a bullet related to adding or deleting scope from a project in that section. And that was just to add another notation about types of amendments that are considered in that section. Probably the biggest change in the amendment matrix was that we updated the threshold for when a cost increase or decrease to an FTA funded project is considered a full amendment. And the previous threshold was 30% just for all FTA funded projects. It's been updated now to match what is used for FHWA funded projects. So if it's under $1 million, it's an increase or decrease of 50% in the project cost. If it's between 1 and 5 million, it's a 30% increase or decrease. And as it gets larger, so over $5 million projects, the increase or decrease threshold goes down to 20%. So basically the larger the project, then the lower the threshold for when it becomes a full amendment. Then in the administrative amendment sections, we deleted one line that was duplicative related to slipping projects, and then we added a line that it basically says that if a project is added for by Western Federal Lands, recreational trail, or local bridge program, so these separate funding programs and processes, if they've gone through a committee process that involves public comment, then it would just be considered an administrative amendment because it's gone through that process elsewhere. So the attachments, if folks want to review further, there's attachment 1 is the previous STIP matrix. The second one is the updated version that was shared with SKATS in October. And then the third attachment, like I said, is the line edits for the SKATS TIP matrix. And that's all I have on that one.
Okay. Questions or comments on the amendment matrix? Felt very straightforward to me. Must be straightforward to everybody else too. All right. Spot on. Let's go then to item G, which is a summary of the MTIP modifications. Steve.
Okay, so Desiree sent out an update to this yesterday, so hopefully folks saw that. I'm gonna pass it out for folks in the room. Reason was that we had 4 additional amendments that were processed late last week, and I wanted to include that in this meeting packet rather than waiting until December to update people on that. But this is just a rundown of modifications to the TIP over the last month. The first 3 were all the amendments approved at October's policy committee meeting. So those should look familiar. The number 4 and 5, those were administrative amendments that just adjusted our funding levels for number 4 is for our MPO annual work plan, and then number 5 was for a transit project that ODOT gets FTA grant funding for. The 6th one relates to the commercial street project, City of Salem, and we slipped the right-of-way and construction phases to just better meet the realities of the project schedule on that one. And then the last 3 I wanted to highlight, so Center Street and Connecticut, we slipped both of those projects from construction from 25 to 26. There's some outstanding right-of-way files that the Marion County is working on, but we just slipped it right now to protect our obligation rate, essentially our obligation targets, because if the projects proceed and the right-of-way files are hopefully resolved quickly, we'll just advance them back to 2025. So did that as a precautionary because sometime in December, our obligation targets lock in, and we don't want to include things that have potential to not obligate if everything doesn't go, as planned. So the same is the case on the last one. So the Verta project, the schedule is to have design and obligate construction by the summer, and then I think to go to bid in the fall of 2025. But just because that's a tight timeline with the end of the federal fiscal year, we slipped it for now. And then I'm talking to the ODOT engineer Kumar about, if they move forward, we'll bring it back to 2025 to obligate. So.
Well, we got an update at our last city council meeting. Our public works director also talked about spanning 2 different federal fiscal years because of match. So there was a need to cross that October 1 threshold, which totally bums me out because I really want to see this project get some dirt moving, but all right, whatever gets it built. So I was telling people, yeah, I think we're gonna be able to get going on this in calendar year 25. People don't understand federal fiscal year all that well.
Yeah.
it's a kind of a hard sell for me too, but a little special. Trevor?
Yeah, so I just in my ward, and I think maybe the biggest project on the list is the commercial and Vista to Ratcliffe. Is that the intersection? And it looks like it's being slipped as well, so it's probably not gonna get construction until 2027.
Yes, on the when the construction would happen, 2027. And then I don't believe that's the intersection project. Julie's here, so I think maybe she should.
It is the intersection project as well as the sidewalk infill on the east side of commercial there.
Okay. So 2027, I'll let my neighborhood association know. It's been a desire for this to happen for, I think, 30 to 40 years. So 2027. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, we're on a similar page. It's like so close.
Yeah,
Yeah, really wanting to get that dirt moving.
absolutely.
All right. Thank you very much. Anything else on the MTIP mods? Okay, let's go then to informational item. Just to bring everybody up to date, the next policy committee meeting will be in January. We're not going to be meeting in December because I think that's like right on. You know, five Tuesdays in December, but yeah, Christmas Eve. Anybody really feeling it? I didn't think so. Okay. So next TAC meeting will be December 10th. The Oregon Metropolitan Planning Organization Consortium OMPOC will be on January 31st. On my calendar, the OTC meeting on December 4th. And then at some point, if people want to, we'll revisit the MPO structure in 2025. I have no comment on that whatsoever. And then the transportation planning update, and see that in the section. Mike, do you want to talk about any of those?
Just on Safe Routes to School, you'll see in the matrix, we had Ruby Bridge's Safe Walks to School events at 11 elementary schools on November 14th. I attended the one at Myers Elementary School, which I had a lot of, I had the mayor of Salem there, had the superintendent there, other people from the community, and in addition to the whole school coming out. And it was quite an event. The kids make wonderful posters about Ruby Bridges. They get to learn about Ruby Bridges, who she was back in 1960 when she was a 6-year-old girl in Louisiana, helping, well, not helping, but she was the focal point of desegregation of the schools in Louisiana. And I was going over the history again yesterday. There was a lot of uprising in New Orleans about that integration. So I think, but the kids get a chance to learn about this, but also there's that connection to Safe Routes to School. And our first year we had it at 1 school. Last year we had it at 8 schools. This time we had it at 11 schools. So we're getting more people, and it's the kids' involvement, their excitement for it brings joy to my heart and everyone else who's involved. And then you may remember last year we had bicycle safety classes in addition to the pedestrian safety classes. So we piloted it last year at 3 schools. This year, I think we're doing 5 or 6 schools. In addition to that first year, we're doing 3rd to 5th graders. This year, we're incorporated some kindergarten to 1st grade PE classes. So we had the first one at Harrod Elementary School in West Salem. And then next, or after Thanksgiving, we're going to have it at Chavez Elementary School. And we're starting to work or plan and figure out how we're going to have our own bike fleet, because we've borrowed the Cycle Oregon bike fleet last year and this year. And we won't have access to it forever. So we are figuring out how much they cost, who we're gonna buy it from. But probably our biggest need, and that's why I'm talking to the policy committee that might be able to help. Our biggest need is where can we store the bike fleet when we're not using it, and who can help us transport it from school to school. So we need to talk to the school district to see if that can be done by them. And if they can do it, great. This year, the city of Salem and city of Keizer stepped up to help us transport the trailers to each school, but it's something we need to resolve before we buy the bike fleet. So we'll be having conversations with several people in the next month or two about that element of safe routes to school, so we can continue offering these bike safety classes, which the kids, not only do they love, but it raises attendance at schools. That's what all the PE teachers are telling us. Kids are excited to come to school when they can do a bike safety education. So I'll stop there, but a lot of great things happening in safe routes to school.
Question.
So Mike, how many bikes are you talking about?
Well, probably in the neighborhood of about 100. We probably want to have 2 trailers with 40 bikes for the bigger kids, and it might be 120, maybe 40 more for the small kids. We haven't settled on numbers, so take these with a grain of salt, but those are the kind of sizes of bike fleet we have today. So.
And how many safety helmets do you have to go with those bikes?
I don't know. I think it's something in that same neighborhood. So I don't know for sure, but it would probably be about 100, maybe more. It's the bikes that are going to be the costly part. So they cost probably about $400 each. And I'm hesitant to say any more about cost because we only have some preliminary numbers. We're going to work with Cycle Oregon to help develop this a little bit better, since they've, purchased these things recently. Although one of their vendors recently shut down, so we have to figure out which vendor we go with as far as the bikes. But if you have any funds to help us buy bikes, if you have any sponsorships that you think the private sector would like to work with us, I'm always have my ears open and would love to coordinate with either of those options.
So one thing is to make sure you keep this in front of the Keizer Traffic Safety Bike Ped Committee and updated numbers on the need so that they can be actively participating in that and bringing resources as they hear about them. So highly encourage that. And City of Keizer was happy to help out. So keep that conversation open as far as next year and following. It might be a year over year decision on the part of the cities, but keep asking. I know our police are thrilled with the results.
I'd love to get a grant. I was just reading yesterday how down in Lane County, they got a grant for 40 bikes about a year ago. I think that was from their public health, some kind of public health grant from Lane County. We hear about, private firms donating bikes. In fact, there was a story about another donation was made to Grant, Bush Elementary School just this last month. And the governor showed up to show when they were showing off the new bikes to the kids. So I'm hopeful that we can identify some private foundations that could help us, or maybe a public grant. So don't be surprised if I get on the phone and call one or more of you about those opportunities.
Sounds good. All right. Anything else? Before we're done, though, it is really important.
I have one thing.
You have one thing? Okay.
I'm serving on the work group for the Joint Committee of Transportation. I'm on group 1, which is operations and maintenance. And what we found out from when the cities, counties, and state put all of their needs in on roadways, the rate we're changing our bridges right now, we're on a 130-year turnaround to catch up. Roadways, sidewalks in cities, counties, it's way behind. So once we got everybody's things together, and just numbers I want to share with you, we need about $860 million annually per year to catch up. So as we move forward and we're discussing projects and stuff, I just want you to know that the state of Oregon's in critical need right now in addressing and focusing on our infrastructure. A bridge gets tagged in a rural area, it can be 200 miles around that bridge for weight limits. So there are a ton, and no matter where you go in the state, they're all facing the exact same things. Just like when you come through Salem here, down Commercial Street, and all of those cracks are filled, and it looks like a jigsaw puzzle. As we keep kicking that down the road, instead of just a general maintenance or an overlay or a seal coat, now it's a major rebuild. And we're facing this everywhere. So I really ask you to focus on maintenance and operations in our infrastructure, because no matter whether you ride a bike, you walk, you have transit, you're in a car, pickup, or a semi bringing freight and goods, we need these roads and bridges to maintain our infrastructure and our economy. So yes, everything's required and everything has its needs and its priorities, but if we don't have the roads, we can't go anywhere. And somebody said, really need to move to electric. Electric cars still need roadways. They still need parking spaces. You can't put them in your purse and bring them into your office. So those are our criteria moving forward. And I hope we can incorporate those priorities in our local groups here as well. So thanks. If you have questions, you can email me. I'd be glad to answer and tell you a lot of things we discussed. I've got lots of notes in my office and stuff, but they have been really good. The future ones are really becoming interesting conversations as we all give and take. So thanks. And now.
Okay, Trevor.
Yeah, mine's a bit more informal. I just wanted to say thank you to my fellow policy committee members. My time in this body is coming to an end. I think as of today, it'll be Counselor Varney, but that might switch in the early next term. I had a good time. This is very worthwhile. I want to say thank you, Chair Clark, and thank you to staff and especially Mike Jaffe for kind of helping me walk through this. It really feels like we got a lot done. I don't know that this was a typical couple of years in terms of all the infrastructure stuff, but just really grateful for everybody's involvement. And I had a good time. It's very worthwhile. I'll miss you guys.
We're going to miss you too, Trevor. Really appreciate your hard work and really helping us understand Salem's position, projects, Salem's voice. So thank you so much. And also your perspective as an ER doctor and the impact on our health and wellness in our community. That's been a real value added from my point of view. So I wish the best to you and your family. Thank you for stepping up to serve Salem and our area. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mike.
Yeah, I wanted to give a quick plug to the next MWAC meeting, which is December 5th. I know many of you are on MWAC, some are not, but many of you are. And I might throw this to Brandon, but I'm just going by memory. There's two important items on that agenda. One is getting an update on the Center Street Bridge seismic upgrade project. So the project manager Andrew Walker will be there to give us an update, which is a very important update to listen to. So if you're on MWAC, or even if you're not on MWAC, you might want to tune into that meeting, December 5th at 3:30. There's another item that is also a project within the SKATS boundary, but it's at the 2251 intersection. There's a proposal to do some immediate safety work, generally prohibiting the left turn at 22 and 51 from 51 to westbound 22. And so blocking that to reduce one turning movement, which is a kind of a dangerous turning movement because of poor sight visibility, and moving that to the west at South Oak Grove Road. So Anna's going to give us an update on that. So if you're interested in either of those projects, be sure to attend the meeting or listen in on Zoom.
Want to tag on to that one as well. It's going to be the final meeting for one of the founding members, I believe, of MWACT, and that is Mayor Ken Woods of Dallas. He did not run for re-election. He has served on the Dallas City Council for 42 years. His gentle wisdom, humor, and focus on regional safety has been second to none, and he has really made a difference, not just for our act, but also helped other acts get their act together. And he's going to be missed. So cards, notes that you would like to send here to the COG can be given to Mayor Woods at that time.
And we do have a recognition to give to him. And I think some ODOT staff are bringing refreshments and cake.
Yep. So feed them and they will come. So now you have motivation to come to MWACT, hear all that good stuff, and stay for the party. So, and bring your best Ken Wood stories. Heaven knows, 42 years worth. We could be here a while. All right. Anything else for the good of the order?
So Trevor, I'd just like to tell you thank you for serving in the city and all this stuff, but I wanted to tell you even more, thank you for choosing your profession and serving in the emergency room. My son works in the emergency room as an ER nurse, and that is something very commendable. So thanks for and I'm excited you can put your full attention back now on keeping us alive when we come card in. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. Have a wonderful holiday season. The time is 1:19 and we are adjourned.